Heidegger is in the background giving so much to death, okay, that death determines everything. And then we later see Nazi, Jean-Luc, and Blanchot, and Derrida, and Agamben attempting to not do away with the concept of death, but trying to get out of it altogether. To give you an example that really parallels this book beautifully is Giorgio's Language and Death, which is a book about the same size. It's, instead of having 7 days, it has what? The 8th day. How many days is this? 5th day.
What was the title of the common book?
It goes 6 days, 7 days or something. Language and Death.
Thank you.
And it's a direct response to Heidegger's discussion of death. I'm pretty sure it being in time. Agamben replies one other time to, he took the Lyotard, Thor, seminar post-World War II with Heidegger in France. He and about 2 or 3 other people. And it's in the book Stanzas. It's, which is composed of very, very brief writings, okay, like 5 pages, 6 pages, or something like that. And he tells us, I'm not going to tell you what he said. It will be more fun and more rewarding if you find it yourself and read it. He tells us this story about Heidegger. He reports on what Heidegger did during the break, leaving the seminar. It was very interesting. But they're all struggling with Heidegger because it's just too much. And Heidegger, after being a time, was struggling with it, obviously, but trying to do something with the immensity of death. So it's death and negation, okay? And Hegel resolved it through a paradox, okay, of bringing all these disparate things together under the sign of spirit. Okay. But think of Norman O'Brown. Am I boring you already? Nope. No. Think of Norman O'Brown, Nobby, who was a classicist and was shunned and made fun of by a lot of other classicists who wanted to practice philology, okay, all of the basic rules. But he writes this book, Life Against Death. So a lot of people out there, but this is kind of wishy-washy stuff. I mean, it's something you have to read several times to try to figure out what are the moves here? How can you do this? How can you deal with this? I mean, there's Arakawa and Gins, the architects, and who have this beautiful book called Reversible Destiny, and another book that, the general title is To Outlaw, a Crisis Ethics, which is law, okay, the very idea that we have to die, okay. And so they try to create places and spaces where you might live forever and not die. And they think of the body also in terms of an architectural structure, of course. And their book on, what is it?
Architectural Body.
Architectural Body, yeah, it's a beautiful book. So I mean, a lot of people, and I don't know that they ever refer to Heidegger. I haven't been able to find, I haven't read everything yet. I'm writing about them and have written a couple of pieces which were accompanied with an audio without any sound. And the words in sync with the audio are as best as I can get them, because I find them fascinating. People who take on projects like that, death. But they don't mention him by name in anything that I've read, but they use pretty much the same language, okay, every now and then. Which means is that there are traces, if you were to analyze blood, you could find traces of his words inside the blood. Very interesting. Where else was I going?
You're talking about death as a negation.
Yeah, okay. So, Bindle Economy, I was talking about that. Why is this book so important? And why is it so compelling for people who will take it seriously. We will go into that tomorrow. But he takes on Marx, and he loses a lot of friends because he was a Marxist, so, in quotes, let's put that in quotes. Socialism or barbarism, it was one of the groups that he was involved in. And he left behind his friends when he wrote that book. And he takes St. Mark's, and turns him into a hermaphrodite, which is like pissing on, what's like, what is the piss Christ? Who was the artist?
Serrano.
Yeah, the Serrano, yeah. Who, everyone just got bent out of shape about that. Even the atheists. The basic thesis, among many others, in that book is political economy will not do it. It will not get you where you want to go. This is later this is looking back at the total failure of the Frankfurt School as well. Now a lot of people will say, what do you mean failure? Well, I can give you a list of responses to them that Habermas is not very welcomed here among these thinkers. And when I taught my first seminar, it was on Habermas and Lyotard, that relationship. But what he is saying is that a political economy is pretty much based on consistency of reason. And go around and locate the contradictions and fix them. Reason, is the utmost. Bringing in as many people as you can, as reasonable as you can, so that you can have equity. Well, one of the things that's learned is, for example, I can teach a course in ideology and teach students that if they buy a particular brand, that they are not acting in their own best interests or the interests of other human beings. They didn't know that before. But they come to understand it intellectually and maybe even emotionally understand it in the class. And then after the class, you can see one of the students wearing Gap or whatever it was that was the object that you studied, the object of domination of other human beings. So the Bindle Economy is an attempt to explain what the problem is. So in Capital One, a lot of people have written about this. Just think of Zizek's first book, The Sublime Object of Ideology. He's talking about Freud, he's talking about Marx, and so on. And he points out in that book, in chapter one, in Capital One, Marx talks about ideology, and he spells it out very, very clearly. They don't know they're doing it. They're doing something that's not for their best interest, but they don't know that they're doing it. But then when they do know that they're doing it, how does one even begin to talk? And they do it anyway. I mean, they know better, but they do it anyway. How in the world do you deal with that? Why is that happening? Well, you bring them back in, and you try to get them to see the contradiction, so that they will change their ways, and they can't. They can't. Why? Because there's something called libido attachment. It's another economy altogether. Freud was talking about it, and I'll go into that in greater detail tomorrow. But it's an attachment that Lacan founded, and just that's why you get this thing. Well, maybe you have to enjoy your symptom. There's no cure. It's a bit of a joke, but it's serious at the same time. Now he talks about he's working out of Kant and so many other people, but he sees Kant as a sophist. That's heretical. That really pisses off more people. That's like having Kant in there with a little jar with piss in it. Okay? And Aristotle calls him a sophist.
Really good piss.
I'm sorry?
Really good piss.
But Kant basing his thinking on Aristotle and basing his thinking on Plato, dealt with three but he called them critiques. Remember, this is like 18th, 19th, into the 20th century when critique is everything, okay? Absolutely everything. We can fix everything. That's modernism. Human beings are the measure of all things, full time. And we're in charge. How does this thing open up? Not with an author, not with an addresser, but he comes into being because he's addressed. You enter this in the middle of a conversation. Is that just a gimmick of some kind or another? No, he goes on to explain why he does this. We are basically addressees. Forget authors, authority, rules. So there is the notion of the true, the good, and the beautiful. You find this in Plato, right? This is the philosophical life. True, the good, beautiful. Aristotle set it up in terms of knowing, doing, and making. Kant comes along, and it's a trio, okay? Kant comes along and has the critique of pure reason. Very, very different though. Okay. And then the critique of practical reason. Okay. So that'd be like knowing and doing. Okay. And then the critique of judgment, which is his book on the beautiful, which is totally undercut by what? The sublime. And one of the things that Deleuze says, I don't think he uses these metaphors, but he talks about the first one, the second one, and listen, threes are it. Search for the third. Search for what has been excluded. The excluded middle. Bring it back in. I'll go back to the example of males. There's only one sex in a minute. But this is the true, this is the good, and this is the beautiful. What happens here is that there is the sublime, and it is uncontrollable. It is totally uncontrollable, and it's colossal. It's counting for forever. Okay, and it begins to back up like a septic tank. Backs up. And the purification is gone. So you find Henry Miller in The Tropics of Cancer says, "I love all things that flow." Have you read that book? And when everything is just, stuff you've never put together, you would never want to put together. Okay, he loves all those things mixed together. And he's talking about philosophy. He's talking about the pre-Socratics and so on with that very, and he said most of philosophy, the most that's been produced is a dry fart. That's a quote. A dry fart. Okay. Deleuze and Guattari pick up that passage in Anti-Oedipus. So they love all things that flow as well, all mixed together. Okay. But there's always someone in the audience who's going to say, would you like to live in a septic tank coming into your house? So you get that sort of response. And then I tell them the story of my Aunt Mary that fell in the septic tank. It weighed 300 pounds and it was forever to get her out. And they're totally mystified at that point. Diane got really upset with me once because we were online, she invited Michelle Valif and me and a couple of other people and her students. It was a seminar. And the students were asking questions, and so it got to the point where I had to tell my story about Aunt Mary. And the student got really bent out of shape, not online, but went to Diane's office, and Diane had to deal with it for 3 hours. It was like therapy or something like that. So every now and then, she brings that up, about I should take greater care, speaking to young people or something.